الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to this ninth reflective session whereby we will be reading from the work of the great Ottoman scholar Said Nursi in his treatise titled A Message for the Sick or A Message for the Ill. رسالة لكل مريض. Alhamdulillah, over the past few sessions now we've been discussing, reflecting and pondering on the various advices and spiritual counsels that he provides for individuals who are afflicted with disease and ailments, and how they can find meaning and spiritual value to the situation and to the trial that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed upon them. And one of the things that you pick up in the work of Said Nursi, particularly this text, and in his Risale Nur as a whole, is that Said Nursi attempts to change and alter the mindsets and the paradigms of his readers such that they move towards a more qualitative understanding of their human personalities and of their worship, and away from a quantitative or materialistic approach and outlook with regards to the human personalities and the worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And speaking about quantitative and qualitative understandings or approaches, we are obviously in the blessed month of Ramadan, and this is an opportunity for us as Muslims to focus and enhance the qualitative aspect or the qualitative dimension of our human personality, and also of our acts of ibadah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the problems of the modern age, according to Charles Taylor in his work The Secular Age, is that he says that human beings are trapped in what he calls an immanent frame, and this immanent frame forces us, even if we belong to religion or not, it forces us to look at every aspect of our lives in a very materialistic and in a very naturalistic way. And individuals who belong to religion or to a specific faith group, even when they perform or exercise their respective religious rituals or their spiritual exercises, even the manner in which they enact these rituals or activities is very materialistic or very quantitative, in such that they look at their worship externally in terms of the frequency and the external intensity, and tend to neglect the internal and qualitative dimensions of their worship. And I think that's something very important for us to reflect upon, because when we become engrossed only with the external, particularly our external worship, then what happens is that we tend to end up worshipping our worship, and we forget that we have to worship Allah, that our worship is a means to Allah. Our worship is not an end in itself. And if we are able to focus on the qualitative in relation to the quantitative, we'll be able to find that balance. And inshallah, may the month of Ramadan be that opportunity for us where we are able to find that harmonious balance or equilibrium between the external and the internal, or the quantitative and the qualitative. Within Islam, it's not about prioritizing the one over the other. So it's not about just focusing on the esoteric, or it's not just about focusing on the exoteric. It's about finding that mizan, that balance between the two. And once you've found that equilibrium, you have now found yourself in a very safe space and environment. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this blessed month of Ramadan to make us of those who are able to find that balance between the esoteric and the exoteric, such that we are able to worship Allah in the best of ways. Now focusing on the seventh remedy, Ad-Dawa al-Sabi'. Sayyid Nursi says in this remedy, one who is afflicted with disease and who has lost the pleasures of good health, do not despair, but realize that there is a great wisdom in this. And he goes on to say that the divine wisdom in being afflicted with disease in this specific remedy is that if you as a human being were immune to disease or to illness, then you would have not appreciated the great bounties and the great capacities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed within you. And when he mentions capacities, he's referring to the capacity of sight, the capacity of hearing, the capacity of taste, the capacity of smell, the capacity of tactile sensation, and many other aspects. And his point here is that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not remove your good health from you, then you would have not recognized these great bounties that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you as a human being. And when we reflect upon this, I mean, I think it's self-evident that many of us have neglected or have taken for granted these great blessings, the great blessing of sight, the great blessing of smell, the great blessing of hearing, and so forth. And what has happened is that we've created this notion within our minds that all these gifts that we have come to become so accustomed to, we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is obligated to give us these gifts. But that's not the case, because when we look around us and we really open our eyes, we see that there are so many people in this world that have not been given this full array of gifts. There are certain people who are blind, there are certain people who are deaf, there are certain people who are mute, and there are certain people who are not able even to move due to some form of impairment. And when these illnesses come and afflict us such that it impairs our sight, or it impairs our hearing, or it impairs our movement, or whatever it may be, we now come to realize the value of these great gifts. And so Said Nursi further states that it's only through opposites that you truly appreciate and understand the meaning of a thing. So you only really appreciate the value of good health when illness has been placed upon you, and so forth. And I think there's many points that we can extract from the specific remedy that he provides. And the most important is that we should always be in a state of gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what He has given us. As we mentioned, there is no reason why we should feel or think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is obligated to give us what we have. This is from His bounties. And unfortunately, we just constructed this understanding that whatever we have, we are due that from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such that it is necessary for us to have them. But that's not the case. That's really a result of our arrogance. And as Said Nursi mentions in this point, it's only when these things are taken away from you in some form or in some amount that you truly realize your impotence in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this in itself should motivate us to always be in a state of gratitude. What's important to recognize as well is that sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses us by taking something away from us, because we might not know at that time that we could have used that very gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us in His disobedience, in disobeying Him or disobeying the laws that He has set for us. And you know what's interesting is that if you look at the word ni'mah, which stems from noon, ayn and mim, right? And obviously, as we know, the word ni'mah means blessing or bounty or favor. When you take that word and you switch around the letters, then one of the words that you can construct from that is man'un, prevention. And what's interesting, as we mentioned before, is that within the Arabic language, words have an etymological relationship with each other. So just as the word ni'mah means a bounty, the word mana' or man'un, which refers to being prevented or being taken away or retrieved, that in itself should make us realize that even when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prevents us from something, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bars us from something, or when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes away something from us, that in itself can be a ni'mah, because, as we said, we do not know if we would have used that thing or that bounty in the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why Ibn Atta'illah mentions in one of his aphorisms, in one of his hikams, ربما أعطاك فمنعك وَرُبَّمَا مَنَعَكَ فَأَعْطَاكَ. Perhaps that he gives you something only in reality to take something away, and perhaps that he takes something away from you, but in reality only to give you. And we as human beings will never be able to understand the bigger picture of things, but if we have full submission in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we appreciate those things that he has given us, then we will be able to recognize these bounties, either in a state where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us, or in a state where he takes away from us. We will be content and we will be happy irrespective of the state, because we recognize that it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who is involved in our well-being. One of the things that I also wanted to mention in this point is the importance of gratitude, and that we should always be looking at every single moment to identify those bounties that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Earlier on I mentioned just a few with regards to the various senses that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, but if we really try to enumerate the bounties that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, it would be impossible. And so therefore it's important that we are always in a state of shukr, in a state of gratitude. And again, what's interesting is that if you look at the word shukr, which is comprised of the letters Sheen, Kaf and Ra, and you change just two of the letters, one of the words that you come out with is shirk, right? When you change the Sheen and the Ra, it now becomes shirk from shukr. And that shows us again from the etymological relationship within the Arabic language that if you as a human being, as a Muslim, are not able to identify and thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all the great blessings, for all the great bounties that he has given us, right? If we overlook these bounties or we do not use them in the best of ways, then ultimately by not being grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what he has given us, we now enter into that very perilous and dangerous domain of shirk. Because when you're not able to show gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what you are now doing is constructing this understanding that whatever bounty or whatever blessing or gift that you have, you create this understanding that this gift is now from your own doing or from the doing of other corporeal beings and not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? That is ultimately what you can implicitly extract from not being able to show gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what he has given you. And this ultimately leads you to a state of shirk, or to a state of associating Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with partners, because you ultimately now believe that whatever you have is from either yourself or from others and not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's obviously a very dangerous position or domain to be in. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who are able to recognize all the bounties, because everything that he has given us ultimately is from him and is from the bounties that he has provided for us. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who are able to recognize that, and who are able to internalize that, and who are able to actualize that, such that whenever we act in a way which is always appreciative to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what he has given us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of those who are grateful for those things that he has given us in this life. May he grant us the best of this life and in the year after. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.